You are now tuned in to the Cosmic Convos podcast, your number one source for accurate, relevant, and thought-provoking astrological conversations in the podcast nation, the place where stars and minds align.
Peace. You are now tuned into the Cosmic Convos podcast. I'm your humble host, Herut, and I got my good brother over here, Brother Ra. How you doing? Hold up. There you go. There you go. How's everything going, Ra?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We good.
Peace,
Now
peace.
I can
you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. We're good.
Yeah. Good. I just said living, learning, and applying. How about yourself, King?
Hey, man, I'm on the same level, man. On that same tip, man. Just trying to take it to the next level, man, and make the next day better than the next day. You know what I mean? Than the last day for sure.
Indeed.
But before we get too far, I want to remind you all, make sure you like this video when you come in here. Like this channel, subscribe to this channel, and share this on all your different social media handles and everything, so we can take this thing to the next level or whatnot. And I want to remind you all that this episode is brought to you by Push It Forward Media Group, Calipusha Astrology, and our good people over there on Patreon. Big up to y'all. Big up to the patrons out there or whatnot. Remember, if you want to ask questions, make show suggestions, different things like that, just interact and things like that, Patreon is the way that you do that or whatnot. I got a couple shows that I got to do. We're going to do 2 this week on Patreon. Got a lot of different things going on and stuff like that. So we're going to knock out 2 shows this week. So be on the lookout for that or whatnot. But, to follow us on social media, you can follow us at Cosmic Convo. That's COSMICCONVO on Instagram. And you can catch Push It Forward at Push It Forward, PUSHITFWD on Instagram. From those 2 places, you can find everything that you need to know. You can get connected with all the different podcasts from the Push It Forward Podcast Network. From Push It Forward, and definitely you can find everything related to the Cosmic Convos podcast. Indeed. Ra, how can the people get a hold of you?
Easy. You can hit me up on Facebook or IG via Shechem Ra, Calipusha Astrology.com, where you'll be able to email me directly from the website. So it is almost finished. It will be coming soon, so to be announced.
Indeed, man. Big up to that, man. Big up to that website. Got excuses today. We got a couple little technical issues, the internet isn't perfect out here and stuff like that, but we're making it happen or whatnot. Indeed. And shout out to everybody in the chat, man. Peace and blessings to all of y'all, man. I see all the good people out there, man. Definitely like to see everybody tuned in for the live show, indeed, or whatnot, But let's go ahead and get it pushing. Last show was an interesting show. It's a lot of commentary out there around the brother Bill Cosby, and people are making their opinions on his release and all those different things like that. So, I think that show was right on time, man. And I think not even I think the good thing about what we do is that we use the science, right? We don't go in here and just spew off the top of our head and give our opinions and different things like that. We look at the charts and analyze it from there. What's the feedback you've been getting off last episode?
A lot of people thought it was dope to time it like that and to really pull out the hidden kind of pieces of his horoscope that tie into that whole piece of him doing what he does. I got a couple of good comments on that one, definitely.
Indeed, 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 indeed. Yeah, I think yeah, man. I think that was, of course, it was perfect timing. It was right on the same day and stuff like that. Um, but I think even more so right now, man. This next show that we're gonna talk about today. You understand what I'm saying? Is a good follow up around it. You understand what I'm saying? Well, not necessarily passing a judgment on Brother Cosby or whatnot, but just it contributes to a lot of the different things that we see play out in our lives and in the lives of notable people and different things like that. And if you all saw the title and the Instagram promo and everything like that, you know what we're going to talk about. But before we dive 100% in it, Rod, you got anything that you want to say before we jump into today's topic? Anything you want to announce? Anything like that?
No, not particularly. Just upcoming new moon will be on the 9th. And so be a new cycle that we'll be entering into for 30 days. Get an opportunity to start over and kind of complete some things that maybe you didn't finish last cycle. So just a good time to keep note of that and follow the lunar cycles because that's really our true months. The beginning and end of the month happens to coincide with the sun and the moon. So uh, definitely stay tuned to that.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. And you know, um, of course, we're coming from the sidereal perspective. So the new moon will actually be in Gemini, but it'll be leading up to the full moon in Capricorn or whatnot. So that's for those of you who don't know, we don't always explicitly state it. In the podcast, it's just kind of a assumed thing. That's a known. We're sidereal Vedic astrologers, so that's the transits and everything that we follow or whatnot. So I did want to and to that point, before we jump, I did want to announce that just want to reiterate that because I know I had a good brother, a couple of people in there make comments and stuff like that, and they don't necessarily recognize the charts or how to read the charts and different things like that. My advice to you is you can look up, Vedic astrology and, you can check in with us. Ra, he has basically a online, Vedic astrology school teaching classes and different things, offers consultations and stuff so you can learn some of the concepts. And what we're going to start doing is, throughout the seasons, we've recommended books and different things like that. We're going to start putting those, recommendations and stuff like that inside of the descriptions of the podcast, whether you're on any other audio outlets that we're listening to, Apple Podcasts and different things like that, or here on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you check out the podcast. We're going to start offering that as well. And then just for those who don't know, typically when we do these shows, we present the charts in a North Indian style chart. But there's other styles as well, the South Indian style chart and different things like that. And Rob, maybe we can, check in and maybe do a couple of them where we, do the South Indian style, for our South Indian people who like to look at it that way or whatnot as well. Maybe, we can present the charts like that on a couple episodes. But I just wanted to give that little tidbit just
Yeah,
for
you can do
those who
them
may be
side by
confused.
side. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, you can definitely do them side by side. Hmm.
Yep.
Hmm.
Indeed.
Absolutely. Yeah, but
And
definitely, we got classes coming up soon. August 14th will be the first class for the level one, right? Level two, level one has moved on to level 2 to 3, right? So we've got a full spread. So if you're interested in classes, definitely get at me, Kalaparusha astrology at gmail.com. Classes are definitely worth it, right? The money will be well spent. I've never had a student that has been with me that has been disappointed. They all pretty much have gone on to learn to study this at a great uh, in-depth level. So, if you're interested, definitely hit me up. We'll definitely be started soon. So you got about a month or so. It's 570, right? It lasts for quite a while until November. So you got a full 3 or 4 months to be with me. So definitely, get at me. Let me know if you're interested so we can move forward.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. So, with all that being said, we got all the house cleaning out the way, man. Let's go ahead and jump into it. So, um, today we're gonna talk about, you know, the astrology of mental illness, right? You know, a lot of, I mean, it's a big topic right now, especially with, a lot of different prominent, I guess you could say journalists and different things like that. It's kind of a big thing that people is always, to seem everybody is kind of tuned into everyone's mental health. And, it's always something that's being considered nowadays and stuff like that. But, a lot of times we like to point to the traumas and different things like that, which, may contribute to it. But, a lot of times, there are just certain things that, some of us are just kind of destined to experience. And it kind of manifests itself in, what we would refer to as mental illness. So, with that being said, man, let's just go ahead and jump into it. You know?
Definitely, let's dive in. Um, this show, and if you followed us for been following us for a while, we touch on different aspects of karmic dispensation in regards to mental challenges. But this shows specifically on, what are some of the triggers or factors that cause, mental instability. And so we've touched on serial killers, right? Mentioned that
Yeah.
a little bit. We even had a class that delved into a very specific aspect of what we look for in mental illness. And the first place we always go to, obviously, would be, classic placement for the moon.
Yeah.
You know, it's a giveaway, right? It's a dead giveaway. And, this is a very touching show for me personally because I have a child, not biologically, but still my child, was there from birth that has what we consider bipolar, right? Manic depression. And
Hmm.
so seeing it up close, uh, up front, and in person, you see, how far it can go when it's untreated or unaddressed. Um, the first thing that we do when we look at a chart, just because it's the normal process of things, we always look to, the moon. And the moon is, if you want to really get deep into the moon, watch that show on the moon. We cover it in a way that I've never seen any other podcast or astrologer cover it. But
Absolutely,
the
man.
moon is, responsible for that. But um, the moon is, really the ground for our emotional um, processes. Right? It's really where we create our world. And, outside of the mind, everything else is pretty much objective, whereas the mind creates, and naturally so, subjectivity. And, when you have a subjective part of you that can be easily affected, right? That's very sensitive. The moon in astrology is, I would say, bar none, the most sensitive planet in all of astrology. more sensitive than anything that we can think of, in the sense that any slight perturbance or any slight disturbance or any slight upset within the context of the moon's placement gives mental imbalances. Now, when we talk about, mental imbalances, there's kind of a scale, like there's some that are extreme, and then there are some that are, you know, um, more mild, less intense. And so the moon, because we all know that, it's connected to our mental disposition. It's interesting to note that studies show that when the moon is full, of course, there is a higher incidence of police reports and 9/11 emergency calls. It's also known that when you have surgery on a full moon, you have a propensity to literally bleed more. So the physical body, right, is affected by this particular planetary or heavenly body. So, given that context, given the weight of the moon in the chart, it has to be placed extremely well in order for the overall chart to work, right, properly. Any slight offset to that moon, right, can direct the person in ways that are abnormal. And these days, that's a strange word to even use, as abnormal, because abnormal has become the new normal. So when we look at the moon, right, exactly, take it to the moon, right? When we look at the moon, we really have to gauge it from a kind of step by step process, right? And I teach this in the classes that I hold, that we go through, and we analyze everything from a very general perspective to a very finite and a very specific perspective. One of the things that we would want to notice is any planets, right? Anything that's with the moon, because the moon is, the color of the moon is white. In fact, it's interesting that asylums, right? The color that is most noted in asylums is what color,
It's
right?
white, all
White,
white, white padded
right?
walls, white jacket.
All white, right? Right. And so that is responsive, right, to their understanding that the moon, right, that reflective quality needs the neutrality of white, needs the white color or the lack of color in order to center itself. Imagine having a hospital with individuals with plaid color or right polka dots, right, which would
Right,
probably create more mental
right.
disturbances, considering that
Trigger you
patterns
off.
are right can affect the mind,
Indeed.
right? Right. So, it makes sense that, even the medical, the psychiatric field, psychiatry field or psychology field has understood that white, right, is a color that is supportive to mental health or to mental stability. But anything with the moon, any planet with the moon, right, it kind of changes the nature or the color of that planet. And, you know, I don't want to put it out there as if everybody's crazy, right? But all of us, we all have some type of conditioning in reality, right?
Yeah.
As I said, some more extreme than the other. Right? That's what we're here for, is to deal with our conditionings, to master our lower nature. So, when we get an understanding that the moon is the conduit, right? It's the activating point to be able to interface with reality. And I'll repeat that again. The moon is the conduit, right? Or the interface of reality. What do I mean? Well, the moon, right, is it deals in the process of childhood, right? And it deals in dealing with the essence of your early years, right? When you're raised up is the moon. Wherever the moon is placed is how you literally your childhood is formulated. And if anything in that childhood has been extreme, unbalanced, unhealthy, right? that is that imprints, right, on the subconscious. Now,
Right.
that subconscious has a process whereby it repeats itself, right? We all do this, right? It's the nature of the moon. It's a cyclical, repetitious process where we go through and we repeat. I mean, you have to some degree because we get up every day, we do the same things on a daily routine. In transits, that's what the moon rules, is your daily routine. It's how you deal with your day-to-day things. So if you're not able to deal with the day-to-day things, we call you mentally ill,
Ew.
right? If you can't manage the day-to-day affairs, right? One of the things that you begin to understand is when you deal with mental illness, one of the questions they ask in criminal cases when mental illness is involved is the competence of the person. Is the person competent? What are they asking? They're asking, is the person's mental ability able to cope and manage with day to day things like paying your bills, right? Taking care of business, buying your food, right? Doing those types of things. When the person is deemed incompetent, right? Then that particular person now is considered almost at a level of being mentally disturbed. And they don't diagnose them with anything. They haven't made any kind of real medical diagnosis. All they're saying is that this person is are they mentally competent or mentally incompetent, and that's just in the court system. Of course, it takes a professional to make the determination, but that's the judgment they make in order to see if the person can even deal with the day-to-day living arrangements that most people have to deal with. So just noting that the moon deals with your normal ways of functioning, the repetitious process that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, if that's skewed in any way, then we have mental problems. So
Yeah,
for
I
an
can.
example, right? And these are
No, I
good.
was gonna say I can. I can. I mean, I can relate because I'm a Cancer ascendant, and I mentioned on another show in regards to like whenever there's an eclipse, especially if it's overnight, I can see my dreams train change, and I can like feel it when that eclipse is happening in my sleep. Like right around the time when it's actually the full on eclipse is happening. I'm asleep. I can feel the dream change and the different things that happen, and just from day to day as the moon is moving around and stuff like that. I can feel the different modes and different just vibes that I may get into from day to day to day to day or whatnot. So it's that I can definitely attest to the the impact of that moon just in a real intimate way.
Mhm.
Not always from mental illness, but just the sensitivity of it.
On a personal level, yeah, the
Yeah.
sensitivity of it, absolutely. The moon it's our processor. It's like a computer. If that computer has, where it keeps repeating the same, note, and that impression was made so hard upon it at an early age, right? It's hard to break
Yeah.
that cycle, hard to intervene into that routine, into that mental recordation, into that mental replay, right?
Right.
If you ever hear people, you know, talk about their mother, right? A lot of times people with mental illness have a real issue with their mother. And I know you're old enough to remember, right? Remember the movie
Hmm.
Psycho?
Yeah.
Remember that movie?
Yeah.
You remember? You might, right? That movie Psycho was based on the issues and problems he developed with his mother as a child. I don't know if y'all remember that, right? But that's how it worked. It literally, right? Psycho was about a guy that had an issue with his mother and used to wear a wig, right? And act like he was his mother in Psycho 2, I think Psycho 3, right? So, and Psycho, literally, the guy was mental, right? He had issues stemming from abuse during childhood. So, this is when we
I can't.
begin to understand it. inner workings and the beginnings, the start
Yeah,
of that
yeah,
particular condition.
yeah. I can't. It's been a while since I seen it, but I
Bates, right?
remember
Norman
Bates
Bates.
Motels.
Yep,
Yeah, Norman
yep.
Bates.
Norman
Yep.
Bates, right? Bates
Yeah,
Motel.
yeah. That was intense. The old one and the remakes. It's a very, very.
Right. I see. I was.
Think we lost Rod. Yeah, man. Every once in a while we had these times where the internet is acting a little shaky and stuff like that. But he'd be clocked right in. There we go. Boom. All right, we
Yeah,
got
the
you.
internet acting weird all day, even with my
Yeah.
my personal stuff. It's that after shadow, Mercury after shadow, retrograde after shadow.
Show us some love, Mercury.
So, um, and you notice that by the sidebar, when it happens, when retrogrades happen in Earth signs, the after the shadow effect, which happens about 3 weeks after, you can still feel that effect because Earth
Mm-hmm.
signs are tangible, physical things. So that's why we're kind of getting this feedback like this. But then let's back to
Indeed.
this particular. Remember talking about Psycho, right? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Norman Bates, right? Used to dress up, kill people, act like it was his mother, all based on the construction of his mental processes as a child being abused and being treated in an inhumane way. So, Mommy Dearest, right?
Mm-hmm.
The movie Mommy Dearest was about a woman that was disturbed. Obviously, the movie's about her mother, right?
Right.
Right. The relationship with her mother and how her mother mistreated her, right? I mean, you can go on and on and on, right? There's story after story that tells, right? Flowers in the attic, right? I mean, you can go on, right?
American
Childhood is a very
Psycho.
sensitive, very precious. Hmm?
Well, that one's a little. Yeah, they don't. I don't know. They don't get into childhood as much, but that's an interesting one as well. American Psycho. Patrick Bateman.
I've heard of it.
That was a. It was a little more
Hmm.
fictional. It was a fictional
And I mean,
spin on it,
I
but yeah.
can guarantee I've heard of it before.
Yeah.
So considering this, right? This is how you begin to unravel what happened. Where did we go wrong? But just to kind of give you like a purview of what this looks like in a chart, anything that's connected to the moon affects the mind. So there are different ways we look at placements in a chart. One of the ways we look at it is called avashtas, and these are states. You learn that in level 3, right? When you take the course at the one of the higher levels. But avashtas are states, like states of consciousness. And so one of the states that we look at is called Lajatati, right? Lajatati Avashta. Lajatati shows us the relationship between planets that are in proximity to one another or in placed in certain houses or in certain ranges of one another. And so one of them is when one of the Lajatati Avashtas is called thirsty. When Venus is with the moon, it's considered thirsty. What does that mean, right? Kind of like it says, right? You know, we have a term that we kind of call people thirsty, right? You're thirsty, right? Kind of means that in a way, right? That you can have a desperate disposition at times. You can go to extremes to get your needs, wants, and desires fulfilled. Doesn't mean in mental imbalance, but you can see many times that, right, the person can have addictions, right, which is a mental illness to some degree, right? Addictions, loving sweets, loving pleasure, loving music, entertainment, not facing what? Reality,
Reality.
right? The moon help the moon helps you interface with reality, right? If Mercury is with the moon, and these are I go through these first because these are the benefics, considered benefics, right? That these are the milder mannered planets that would interact with the moon. But guess what? They still create sometimes mental disturbances. Moon with Mercury with the moon. If Mercury is damaged by placement, it can create someone that is a compulsive liar, right? Because the feelings are tied in with the beliefs, right? The thoughts and the feelings become unified, right? And so when they become unified, right, they don't determine their belief or their thought from what? Reality,
Reality.
right? So they can
Right.
have a chatterbox mind, right? Right? Mind that's constantly going, right? Never shutting down. That's another thing. And this is not considered a quote unquote DSM 4 mental illness. It might be. I'm not a clinical psychiatrist, so it might be. Right? But nonetheless, these are kind of milder mannered kind of dealings, right? Moon with Jupiter. Now, I'm going to blow your mind with this one, folks. It is a Gajakasari yoga, what we consider a Gajakasari yoga, when the moon is with Jupiter, or it's when it's in the first, fourth, seventh, or 10th house from the moon. When it's in the first house, it is considered Gajakasari yoga, but you'd be surprised that Jupiter with the moon, if other placements are there, if it's in the 12th house or the 6th house or the 3rd house, right? Third, sixth, eighth, or 12th are the classic houses. Those are your four houses you want to look for. Third house, sixth house, eighth house, 12th house. When you see the moon in those houses, right, with Jupiter, it can still create mental illness, right? So don't think that just because Jupiter is with the planet, it's going to do something miraculous to help it. It can if other things are there placed well. But if it's in the 12th house, I've seen schizophrenia, right?
Mm.
Moon with Jupiter in the 12th, and Jupiter was exalted, right? Schizophrenia, right? I mean, before we even really kind of get down to the other planets, because now, since we've gotten kind of like the benefics out of the way, we're going to get deeper into what it looks like for these other planets to kind of fit in with the moon and what mental illnesses come from it. But before we do, let's kind of look at what mental illnesses there are out there. And there's so many. I mean, they have a whole volume called the DSM 4, right? It's a thick book, right? This big, right? And it's about this thick, but it's a clinician book, and you have all the list of quote unquote mental illnesses. It's strange that homosexuality used to be listed in there, and they removed it. Just as a
Mm.
side note, right? um, we have schizophrenia, which is classic, right? Schizo meaning kind of like a splitting of the mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have multiple personality disorder, right? You have epilepsy, which is a form of mental illness. You have bipolar, right? Bipolar, or we call what's also called manic depression, right? That's another mental illness. You have autism, which is a mental illness. You have narcissistic complex,
Mm-hmm.
mental illness. Psychosis, right? And there's one that we are haven't, and I don't know if it's classified. Help me if it is. I'm always open to knowledge and using it in regards to the system, to the knowledge. But suicide is a mental illness in my classification. What that is, the grandest sin that you could ever commit is suicide, right? One of the things you never want to do is take yourself out, right? It just doesn't help in any way. And strange that most spiritual systems slash religions, this is the rule, right? Suicide is just a no. But these are kind of like the general kind of classical mental illness. Of course, you have age related mental illnesses, which we consider dementia and Alzheimer's, right?
Right.
That's another mental illness, right? So there's, a broad range, but they're all covered under the gamut of astrology. Each particular illness can be diagnosed and understood from a particular placement. Now, getting back to the moon, right, since we kind of digressed, the moon, right, when it's with the sun, is considered obviously a new moon.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the harsher kind of placements out of the planetary combinations. It's not harsh in the sense of and it's not abnormal, but it does create someone that it has a very self-determined disposition, almost to the point where they won't allow you to do anything with them or for them. They're very self-autonomous. Not to say that is a mental illness, but understand it creates self-aggrandizement, which can lead to narcissistic dispositions. Right. So when you deal
I've
with
seen.
narcissism, look for that combination of sun and moon. Right.
Yeah. No, I've definitely I can attest to that. I've
Right.
seen that. I know I got a couple people close around me with, born on new moons that have that vibe for sure.
Oh yeah, it's frequent, man. It's real
Yeah.
frequent. Very independent. Can't tell them anything, right? The mind is locked into place. They have a
It,
very high opinion of themselves,
sometimes what I've seen
especially if it's
sometimes,
in the first house.
yeah, like I've seen it, and it's an independence, but it's not always grounded in, like we were just talking about, in reality, right? It's more
No,
of a it's a ambition. It's something that they pursue, but it's not necessarily um, justified. Like it's someone that needs assistance, but
they
they
may need
want to
help.
be
They
this
may
way.
need help
Yeah,
and don't realize it.
exactly.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. And the more planets, the more insulated they are, right, from hearing. Because those other planets, well, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. Well, wait, but you can't do this, right? And
right.
so it becomes somewhat of a challenge, right? Not mental illness, but there are some narcissistic qualities there.
Mm-hmm.
If Rahu is there, then you best believe, because guess what? If Rahu is there, they're born on a what? We're
They were
pretty
born
close
on
to an eclipse
to
many
eclipse.
times,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
That's like no. He was
Or
born on a
K2.
full
So
moon. I was about to say Trump, but he was born on a full moon eclipse.
right. But wait, you said he's born on a what?
A full moon
A
eclipse.
full what?
Moon.
Boom. And moon, we're gonna talk about it. Moon's where? Right? Right.
In the
So
fourth.
the other thing to keep in mind is it's in Scorpio, fourth house. I mean,
Yep, in
it's
the fourth
damaged,
house.
right? It's
Yep.
damaged, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And fourth house is also a house that we look for mental illness, right? Fourth
Mm-hmm.
house is the sanity of your heart, right? How you connect with others, how you bond with the world, how you interface and interlock with what's around you. And
Yeah.
so if it's damaged, it can also create schizophrenia. But we'll talk about that in a minute. So one of the other things is you go down the list. So we got sun. It's one of the milder malefics. But when we get to moon, now we're talking about Chandra Manga. Understand that it can create a temper,
Mm-hmm.
right? It can create violence. It can have a violent disposition, right? It can, right? Not always, but a lot of times it can literally lead to emotional explosiveness, right? Does well in the business world, but does not so well in the personal matters,
Right.
right? Chandra Mongol Yoga, we've said it probably 100 times since we've been doing the show, right? But it is a classic yoga that can create mental disturbances. And I want you to understand mental disturbances from mental illness,
Right.
right? Mental disturbances are the milder. Remember, I said we have a milder kind of scale, and then we have the extreme scale. So we're working towards that extreme scale. With Mars conjunct the moon, if there's any additional malefics involved by aspect or conjunction, then we are talking mental illness.
Right.
If there's one malefic with the moon, not necessarily so, but there can be extremes. The moon with Mars can go to extremes. They can lose touch with reality and can do things to the point where they may not realize what they're doing until after the fact. So remember that moon is reality, right? If it's not interfacing with reality, reality is cut off, and all they are is inside their own world. They're going to act like they are acting in their world on the outside, regardless of what the circumstances are, until the phase passes. Right. Next level is Saturn. Now we're getting into some serious other types of illnesses. One thing I didn't mention is depression, right?
Yeah.
And because
I think.
depression, right, manic depression is different from depression. Depression is actually it's an illness.
Oh yeah. I
Um,
think we could do a
it's a
show
mental
alone
illness.
on depression alone.
Just depression alone. Well, to tie it in, right? Moon and Saturn is the key, right, to understanding depression. Not only in the sense of just being natally placed, because natally placed is going to be a whole throughout the life kind of process, but people intermittently have sometimes depression, and that can be when you're in a sati, right? Or when Saturn is impacting the moon by aspect or transit. So if you're in a
Right.
sati when Saturn's in the 12th, first or the second from the moon, depression can set in. This is a temporary depression, albeit, but it is depression, right?
And that's by
If
natal or
Saturn is
by
in
in
opposition from
transit.
the moon
Right.
by transit, in
Yeah.
transit, right? Right.
Right.
When that moon is moved, when Saturn is moving over that moon, right? It's a little rough. When Saturn is in opposition to the moon, same thing. So, there's times when we can even have bouts of mental illness in our life. That's a normal kind of thing that we fight with when we have some type of, you know, things that we're dealing with. But again, consider, right, that this is based on the overall health of your chart in general. If you have a strong, healthy chart and you have some bouts with Saturn, yeah, right, there's going to be some downturns, right? There's going to be some challenges. That's life. We might have some gray dark clouds over our heads, but the next day or the next couple days you get up, shrug it off, and you're back at it, right? But for those of us that have debilitating positions of our, as far as our placements in our chart, when those times come, then it exacerbates, it becomes worse, it becomes harder to deal with and get out of that circular thought process that the moon creates.
Right.
So Saturn can be a strong constituent of mental illness, right? Strong constituent. The next that would be obvious would be Rahu, right? Which can create phobias,
Mm-hmm.
real harsh, serious phobias. OCD. Remember, OCD is it's the mind, right?
Yeah.
But it can't detach from its programming. Hoarding, right? Constant washing of hands, right? Checking, locking doors, constantly locking the doors, right? I've seen it, right?
Yeah.
Looking out of windows. I've never seen somebody look out the window like every 5 minutes. Like, are you expecting somebody? No, I'm just looking, right? Right. So
Yeah.
and there, it's other things, right? Uh, Constantly checking the refrigerator. Like I watch shows like it could be the smallest thing, making sure the lights are turned. Like they'll flick the lights off and on, and then flick it off just to make sure it's off. So it's like their mind is in a rut. It's in that kind of repetitious thought process where it can't snap out of it. And so Rahu can create those types of OCD disorders, right? Extreme
Right.
phobias. Right? And Moon with K2, I would say out of all of them that we have listed so far, out of every single placement from Sun to Mercury to Venus, all of them, out of every single placement, the Moon with K2 is the most disturbing, right? Even more than so than Rahu, because K2 takes you out of this world. It literally turns the brain off, right? Or it removes your head. So the moon, right, has no way to reflect. Remember, it's almost like having no moon. Now I'm not saying like new moon, that's different.
Mm-hmm.
No moon, no mind. Being mind what? Less,
Less. Right.
right? Being like a zombie type where you're literally detached from reality. And so, we're going to look at some charts to kind of maybe even tie in some of these theories and these concepts.
Indeed.
The other things I want to touch on just quickly before we dive in. Mercury is another planet we look for, right? If Mercury is damaged, what happens? The reasoning capacity, right? Which it can check the moon. See, the moon and Mercury aren't, moon has no enemies, but Mercury doesn't like moon in the quote unquote pantheon of things. Really, it's not a like or dislike. It's just like two chemicals, right? But Mercury and moon, right? They're not necessarily congruent in their energies.
Right.
So Mercury is another planet that we look for to see if it is affected by the same or similar processes, right? Anytime it's with the sun, if it's combustive, it's too close to the sun, and that's pretty common. That's not something that's not common. So you'll find that more often than not. But if Mercury is with Saturn, and remember, if Mercury's with Saturn, Sun is going to be with near Saturn too. That
Yeah.
creates a combustion, that creates a burning of Saturn. So that's going to rock the mental or the I'm gonna say the intellectual or the reasoning capacity.
Right.
See, the moon is common sense. When common sense is gone, common sense, you deal with things on a daily basis. Your common sense, right? The moon is common sense, but Mercury is your rational ability. And if let's say you don't have much common sense, but you're pretty book smart, you can navigate, you can control or mitigate some of those issues, right? But if Mercury is damaged and the moon is damaged, now you have a serious problem. You have a serious contingency here when these planets are both damaged. Um, so those would be the classic planets you look for, right? Moon and Mercury in that order, and of course then with malefics. Jupiter is another planet I want to make mention of, and strangely enough, Jupiter can create mental illnesses when it is in proximity with Mercury or Venus in a very close, tight degree nakshatra or damaged portion of a sign. It can create mental illness. I've seen it. When Mercury and Jupiter are too close together, right? It's two energies competing. They say your intellect and your spirituality compete, right? So
Right.
that means that you can't
Yeah.
hear common sense sometimes, or the right knowledge escapes you,
Yeah.
right? So, there's a lot of combinations, right, that can create these particular patterns. Moon in the eighth house is one I can also say is very consistent with having some type of abnormal, not always, but a lot of times, right? It can be abnormal. Some other things just to cover Kimadrum yoga is when the moon is by itself, no planets on either side, nothing aspecting it, then that can create a very lonely type disposition where depression can set in.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there are certain yogas that can create it. But um, I want to look at if we can, we have some time, a very famous chart would be Sam. I believe Sam Little,
Oh yeah.
and Sam. We don't
Rotate
we
this
don't
to the
have a
moon.
good time, right?
Somebody
We don't
before
have a
we
good
jump into
time.
that,
But guess what?
somebody
Guess
somebody
what? We don't need a
so
good time for him because
no, I was about to say somebody we did when we did the serial killer show. Somebody pointed out because we mentioned that we couldn't find
we
any black serial killers, and they mentioned Sam Little,
black serial killers, right? He's the
right?
Sam
He's
Little,
the
right?
yeah,
I hadn't heard of Sam Little until maybe he killed the most. Right?
Oh yeah, he was hardcore. I
From what I
mean,
understand, he's one of the top serial killers. They doing a show.
yeah, if you
They're
watch
doing a show on
YouTube,
him.
it's probably yeah. If you're watching YouTube, you probably see that ad that keep popping up on his. I see it all the time on my YouTube as an ad about Sam Little, where it's
Hmm.
like, tell us about your
Right,
first one, and then the lady
right.
start, yeah, it's crazy.
She's like, I be dead. He like, you're right, right. So right, no
Yikes.
joke, right? But take a look, right? Take a look. Now, I'm not
It's,
gonna label signs as crazy or or mentally insane. Right? I'm not
yeah,
gonna do because there's no sign that is. All right,
right.
but
There's no
there are
toxic
signs
out
that open the
signs, no
path.
toxic astrology signs that people and stuff like that that people are saying.
No, no, no toxic astrology signs. However, there are nakshatras that are toxic within those signs.
Yeah,
And guess what?
our,
Mr. Sam has one of those classic placements. Oh man, right? Four, four placements in Gemini.
yeah,
Four. Four. That's major, right? At midnight, I put his time as midnight. And remember why I told my students is why I'm telling you why. Midnight allows you to gauge the moon. If the moon is at, let's say, 16 degrees at midnight, then it's a good chance that the moon could be in the next sign.
right.
Because if he's born after 12, right,
It's
it's a,
gonna
probability that the moon's going to move into the next sign.
right.
It could, right? But if we put it at midnight and that moon is 1 degree, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 4 degrees, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, all the way up to 13 degrees, right? We can gauge that the moon is going to be in the same sign because the moon only moves 13 degrees per day. So 8 plus 13 is 24. He's still going to be in Gemini, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we can say for sure that his moon is in Gemini. We know that. We don't know
Right.
the ascendant. We don't know the houses, but we do know that the moon is in Gemini. And we know that the other planet that is there is, guess what? Mercury.
Mm-hmm. Sharing the nakshatra.
Isn't it interesting that I just said that moon and Mercury are the two keys to noticing in a chart for mental illness? That's what you look for. Now, what is it with? Mars. Oh, remember I said violence is one of the propensities of Mars, isn't it?
Right.
Another planet that's there. Look at the
Venus.
degree, but look at the difference between Mars and Venus.
It's 1 minute.
They're like what?
They're almost locked in by degree.
1 minute.
1 minute. Yeah.
1 minute. And I believe Mars is retrograde, isn't it?
No. Venus is.
Or is it Venus retrograde?
Venus is
Venus is
retrograde.
retrograde,
Right.
right? So there's a planetary war, isn't it?
Yep.
Uh oh. And guess who won the war?
Mars.
The planet in the lower degree. There's your murdering of what?
Women.
It's right there. You can't get any better than this, folks. This science is no joke. And guess what? Guess what? If it was Western, it wouldn't even look like this.
Nope. Yeah, all of these
You
planets
have
would go
two
to.
planets in Cancer and two planets in Gemini. You'd have two
I think
planets in Gemini and two planets in Cancer because the two, Venus and Mars, will move into Cancer, and the other was to stay in later degrees Gemini.
Well, moon,
right?
moon would be right there. It'd be like at
Moon,
29 degrees
I mean,
at
it'll be at
Gemini.
the right. That's what I'm saying. Worst case scenario,
Hmm.
right? But I'm
And
saying
that's
moon is at 8 degrees at midnight. So the worst, the furthest he could go is 24 degrees,
right.
right? Because 13 and 8 is 24, right? So the furthest he could go is 24 degrees. He's at, and that's the edge. That's the end of the day, right?
Hmm.
So Mercury is going to move, right? He's going to move, but he'll still be in Gemini.
Right.
So there'll be two planets in Gemini, two planets in Cancer if we're talking tropical, folks. So this is just to show you that the validity of the science is real. All these planets are really in Gemini. That is a lot of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Right.
So know, it goes with C. Person is destined to have mental instability. That the lessons that he was destined to deal with was around stabilizing, harnessing, and controlling all of these wayward thought processes.
Right.
Can't get any better than that, folks. That's dead on.
He also
That's dead
has
on. The man was
he got that debilitated Saturn and it's aspecting that moon. I mean aspecting Gemini from that placement right there as well. And I don't think that Saturn I don't see any
I didn't even
cancellations for
say
it
that.
either.
I wasn't even gonna say nothing about that. That's a whole nother that's a whole add-in, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a whole add-in. So I mean, this is mental illness, as you can see. See,
Oh yeah.
the time is the lock, the key. It's like unlocks everything. But without it, I can still look into the building, can I? Right?
Absolutely.
Maybe I can't walk into the building with the key. Like the key allows me to walk into the building. The time allows me to see everything inside the person. But I can still look inside the building and say, hey, there's a couch over there. There's a, you know what I mean? That's the difference. We're still looking inside his building, his spirit, right? But we're looking in it. We just don't know how it's arranged, right? But we can still see, hey, that's a raggedy couch over there. Hey, that's a messed up picture. Hey, he didn't like his mama, right? You can see all of those things.
Yeah.
Right? So it's great example, and it's kind of interesting. Like you said, they're advertising serial killer. I got to see this. Look at the chart. Oh my God, look at that. Right? You can't even do Moon and Mercury is just alone. I told you, Moon and Mercury does a lot of things, and without a malefic influence, it can create a very intelligent, smart, witty person. But when
Hmm.
Mars is there, that fire, that energy, that angst, and it's in. And here's the thing about it, folks. I want you to think about this. Mars is at 20 degrees and some change. Just a little bit of change back, they all would be in Arthur, wouldn't they?
Oh yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. And RJ ain't
Look
no
at the
joke.
hairline degree. It's a hairline. No, Arthur
Everybody I
is
know
one
what
of the
Ardra
most
is interesting, very interesting people, to say the least. Not knocking anybody who got some, key placements in Ardra, but
very interesting individuals.
yeah, yeah,
Very.
yeah.
No, but this very lively, electric individual, right? Without a doubt. Now, imagine if this was like if he was born like at a time where it puts the Gemini in the ascendant. That would just be completely crazy. But anywhere this is placed in his chart, folks, it's gonna render right these results. So just to
Right,
show you how to look at number one, Mercury, I mean Moon, number two, Moon, and it's in proximity with Venus, Mars, and Venus, and they're in a planetary war. Planetary wars are intense feelings for that person, sexually especially, because Mars and Venus deal in sexuality. Right, so this is definitely one of those classic conditions, classic cases that you can stamp it and put it in the file folder as case closed, right? Because this man is definitely right in the heavens deemed as one that is not. to be played with.
Oh no, not at all. Not at all.
Definitely, definitely. Um, the other, other thing I want to make mention is, when we look at these charts, right, you got to kind of assess what's the worst case scenario and what's the best case scenario. Best case scenario on a chart like this, say we didn't know anything about him at all, right? This guy is pretty witty. He's very smart, right? Very keen, knows how to get in and out of situations, right? Knows how to talk. Did what he did, right? Or none. But behind the scenes, when we begin to look at internally, now this person is tormented. The person really has some issues with women from the very beginning of his life. Right? I'm gonna actually listen to some of the whole thing, but see if I can ear hustle maybe some of those things about his early childhood, right? And see how it would tie into the chart. Because that's when when you would do your case studies, right? That's when you begin to realize that this stuff is really, really, really powerful. You can see exactly what's going on. Um, Another person that we want to who you want to touch on next?
Let's do Chris Costner.
Let's do Kosh. Yeah, let's do Koshner. Let's do Koshner.
Some see, I pull up a picture of her because I know some of these people. We a lot of people have been hip to Sam Little recently for sure, but I know some of these people.
Hmm.
Everyone might not be all the way familiar with. I got a picture of her. Pull it up.
And the beautiful thing is we got Google, right?
Yep.
You can research and find out what's going on. But well, here we go again, right? Right now, this is actually the person's chart, right? This is their chart, her chart. The time is pretty good. So
Yeah.
you notice that moon, right? Anytime that moon is touched, right, it's going to create something special. I'm trying to see if I can. What is the degree of the moon?
28, 28 degrees.
And what's the degree of Venus?
22.
So 6-degree arc, right? Still definitely enough to make an impact. Right? But look where the Lord of the Moon goes. It's with Rahu.
Right. And look, yeah, and Gemini.
Right? The Lord of the Moon, right, is with a planet in Gemini, right? And they
Hmm.
right? There's Gemini again,
Right.
right? It's just one of those signs, folks. It doesn't always mean it, but it can indicate it, right? Seriously, right? The thing that most people don't realize is that the name for Gemini in India is Mathuna. Mathuna means copulation, right? So they have a lot of energy in that regard, right? A lot of mental energy, obviously. But this woman had over, I believe, 20 different multiple personalities, right?
There she go.
That's her. Right, right. And guess what I told? Remember what I said about Jupiter? Look at Jupiter.
Yeah. With Mercury.
Jupiter is with what?
Mercury. Yeah.
You're like, how? Because remember, Mercury is the thought process, is the reasoning capacity, and Jupiter does what? It
Expands it. It blows it
grows,
up.
it
You know,
expands it.
peep this, man. Who has a picture like this? I mean, I'm gonna blow it up, but I mean, How do you catch a picture like that with somebody with multiple personalities? Like,
I'm
how do
trying
you
to
just
tell you,
imagine to
man.
get a picture? Like, that's not an effect. That's the picture. Somebody took a picture with her
Just like
back
that.
to a mirror like that with all the
That's the picture.
different.
Yes. That's not no perfect. Perfect, right? You can't
Out of
get any better
control.
than that, right? So, 22 different personalities, people. 22. Where's remember I told you the eighth house has an effect. The ascendant Lord is in the eighth. In Pisces. And Pisces is a sign that can take you into
Take you out of there.
imaginative fantasy type scenarios,
Right.
right? Its Lord, and then the Lord of the Sun, the Lord of the Ascendant, is Jupiter with Mercury. So it's showing, right, that this expansion of the mental of the mercurial processes. Remember, each one of these personalities is a different speech, a different thought process, a different name, right? So bar none, right, you can see the mental illness at its height. Moon is in the ninth house. Ninth house is a very powerful house, but at the same time, it's with Venus. And Venus is not a very friendly planet for Leo. So it does damage. So again, just showing you moon is always the key. That moon, whatever that moon's going on with that moon, the ruler of the moon, right, can also indicate these things. So considering looking at a chart, let's say you don't know the person. Let's say it's somebody that might be a coworker, and they might have you. Can you just look at this for me? Or do you know anything about this? And you look at it and you see that moon, you can safely say that the person has some mental challenges with no intrepidation. The type of challenges you would just denote is the planet that's conjuncted. Now Venus is acting, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Performance,
Yeah.
right? Trust me, right? That's exactly what's going on, right? This person and Venus is also fantasy as well. Venus is fantasy. Now, look at the nakshatra. Should be Venus should be in Baharani,
Right.
right? And Moon is in Kritika.
Right.
Baharani is a very interesting nakshatra because it can bring a lot of issues with death, right? Issues with sexuality, right? Issues with holding on to things, not dying to things, not letting things go. And so you can see in childhood, right? Probably watched a lot of entertaining things and imbibed a lot of those entertaining things into the subconscious, whereby the walls or the barriers that are supposed to be there aren't there.
Right.
And the moon deals with bonding, how you bond, but it also deals with the ability to understand that bonds die, right? Connections are outgrown. And so, and I would, if you did research, we did research, it wouldn't be surprising if the father was a lot of where she got these mental problems from, because the ninth house is known as the house of the father. But she does also have Saturn in Scorpio in the fourth, and that also is another tell all. The fourth house is your ability to satiate or to bring peace to yourself and to others. So if
Right.
that peace is disturbed and Saturn is disturbing it, person can't rest, can't regenerate, can't recoup, can't internalize and then come out again. They stay stuck. It's slow for them to come out. Right. So this just shows a lot of these propensities is dead on. I mean, she's She's definitely built in the sense that mental illness is something she had to face. So another classic case. Now we're not even talking about dasha periods or any of that, because those things are obviously going to play out in some way. The dashas, the chapters of life for a person when they run that period, right? They're gonna get impacted by those particular forces or energies, and that's gonna play itself out throughout that period. So we don't even have to talk about that. That's just a given. That's unspoken. But what we can garner and what we can ascertain is that these placements are thorough, right? Moon, Mercury, Rahu, Ketu, Saturn, fourth house, third house, eighth house, 12th. We see consistently the same pattern, don't we?
Right. Yep.
Right? It's right there. So another perfect example of how to gauge mental illness in a chart. Perfect example. You got another one we're gonna throw out there real quick?
Um, did you want to do?
Oh
I
yes,
know
yeah. You know who I want to do? Go ahead.
Freud.
Yeah, let's do Freud. Now, let's say this right, and this is an old saying I've heard, and I've seen it pretty much to be true. People that treat people that many times treat mental illness, are they themselves mentally ill? Strange, huh?
Right.
Well, if you look at this gentleman's chart, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with Sigmund Freud and his work, right? But he has come up with a set of terminology or words that we use in common vernacular, common terminology, common language today. One of which is called the ego, right? And the ego is a creation of Freud. Now, Freud did study Kemet intensely, right? He studied ancient Kemet thoroughly. He studied Moses thoroughly. In fact, he has a book on Moses. But one of the things that Sigmund Freud is famous for is his fixation with sexual complexes. And this fixation with sexual complexes, one of the complexes that he would diagnose a woman as having or a man having. For example, let's say he would say that, a woman that's in love with her father has what's called an Electra complex,
Yeah.
or a young man in love with his woman, a mother, will have what's called an Oedipus complex. Now these are European Greek names, right? Because that's kind of where they come from, right?
Right.
Um, these complexes are sexual in nature, right? The id, right, is connected to sexual energy. Now, mind you, right, that those that are in the seat of guiding others out of these kind of conundrums and mental complexes, they themselves have some of the same complexes. This man, right, has the moon in the eighth house, and it is in Taurus. But guess what it is? It's with again. It's good
Mercury,
old Mercury.
my friend.
And the eighth house is the house of what? Hey, the eighth house is the house of what?
Um, secrets is transformations. You know,
Sexuality.
and sexuality. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Sexuality.
Scorpionic.
Boom. Now, the moon and moon and Mercury. So, person's mind is constantly on what?
Sex.
Sex. And the reasoning capacity is hand in step. So it gets real brain. Oh yeah, you got an Oedipus complex. You like your daddy, or you're like your mama, right? I mean, how this comes up, this is the mind of the European. I don't know, right? But nonetheless, this is the diagnoses that he comes up with. These are the clinical terms that he begins to create. Now, this is just a piece. The next piece is Venus is with Rahu, right? Venus is with Rahu. And the ascendant Lord, right, is very key because Venus is with Rahu, meaning that it can create compulsions, right, obsessions
Mm-hmm.
with sexuality. So the person treating the disease is diseased themselves.
Do you think that looking at the axis, right, K2 Rahu axis, where is that? Do you think that's why he was fixated on others and not so much being self-reflective in his own um, issues with those?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Exactly. Other people's stuff
yeah,
when it's really yours. He had the Oedipus complex or the Oedipus complex, right?
right.
Fixated with, sexual, deviancy, if you will. I mean, and let me say this, good friend of mine, right? Good friend of mine. Um, he has some connections. His wife is in the field, and sanity is it's a thin line, right? When you're dealing with people on a daily day basis, right? And you come home, right? And you have to take, and she does have a very strong Mercury, by the way, right? His wife has a very super strong Mercury, right? So she's very sound in her thinking, right? Very stable, but considering, right? I've heard some stories. Let's just say, right?
Oh yeah, it jumps on you. It has to. I
See
mean,
anything, but just knowing, right? Yeah. So thinking of it from that perspective, how much do we really imbibe on a day-to-day basis when we that are untrained, we that are not aware of these kind of interactions, begin to interact with people and not understanding that we're being affected just like we're affecting them.
yeah,
When we're in the proximity on a bus, on a public place, we're receiving these vibrations constantly. You ever had a thought that you knew wasn't yours? I have, right? I'm like, that's not my thought. That's
yeah,
somebody else's thought, right? So thinking about from that perspective, thinking about a child that grows up in an environment where they're like a sponge. The moon is like a sponge, right? They're being bombarded. They grow up in a society that's overly sexualized, and I'm talking about progressively so, right? From the 40s, it's been progressively over sexualized to
right.
that level of thinking.
Yeah,
So when you have this, right, it's easy for these types of mental instabilities, these mental kind of borderline personalities to go over into places where it's unsafe and they can't come back.
yeah,
Right? It's hard to return from a loop that seems real. It's a record player that you just can't stop hearing. You can't stop, and the voices, right? The voices. Remember Mercury, right? In proximity with the moon or interacting with the ascendant. Remember, we saw the last lady with Mercury in the seventh and it impacts the ascendant. So the voices, schizophrenia, the voices, right? Psychosis, you know, these are things that our ancestors quite understood how to handle from ancient times. And people say, well, what can you do? What are some of the remedies that we can do? Seek professional help. And I know I said professionals can be off themselves, but for the most part, right? If you have someone like my good friend's wife, there are people out there that can help. But outside of that, there are things that we can do just from our own kind of um, exploration and self knowledge. One is colors, as we mentioned earlier. Colors are key, right? Colors are what kind of stimulate, right, our auric field. And if you're dealing with someone that has mental illness, the word learn or red, two colors you should never wear around someone with mental instability. Right?
There's even a Chinese medical connection there as far as red goes because red corresponds to the fire element, which is heart, small intestine, meridian systems in Chinese medicine.
Shin
And
disorders. Hmm.
yeah, so when it's too much, energy coming through those meridians, it's like you study Chinese medicine, that's like quintessential. It's like all types of mental illness jump off. Manic, mania,
The eyes
schizophrenia, and all
give
that
it
stuff
away.
like
Yeah,
that and
yeah.
stuff. Like even we didn't pull up his chart, but I know from a Chinese astrology perspective, brother Kanye West. When you look at his chart, man, his fire is off the hook. It's like almost 80%
Hmm.
of his chart. He can't control himself. He just
Shin
gotta,
disorders.
you know,
Mm-mm.
because that fire makes
Too
you
much excitement. Too
project,
much
makes you
excitement.
project.
Mhm.
It's the source of your external expression. You know what I'm saying? And
Mhm.
he
Too much excitement.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. That heart yang excess,
Yeah, but
serious
red is the
problem.
color
Right.
that corresponds to
Heart
that.
yang excess is one of the clinical kind of analogies that we use. Right. Heart yang excess. You're everywhere. Right. You're almost manic. Right. You can't focus. Your
Right.
shin, as they say. Right. Shin is kind of like our mental ability. Right. Your shin is off. Right. Like it's skewed. So, anything that comes to you, you handle in a very extreme way. You either go towards it or you run from it. So, yeah, definitely right on the money. And it's just isn't it interesting that Shin still corresponds to the sun? And remember, the last lady that we looked at, Koshner, her sun was in the eighth house,
Mm-hmm.
right? So her that meant the sun is a soul, and the shin is the ability to see and to get into that soul, to get right, to have access to it.
Right.
So it's right. I mean, all the sciences will converge in some point. I'm talking about the ancient sciences, not the new ones. Will show some consistency in their understanding as far as these things are concerned, by all means. But you know, it's interesting to show that individuals that are there treating illnesses can have illness themselves. Colors are key. Shapes, sizes, feng shui, vastu, the way you sleep, right? All are things that can affect, right, mental illness. Believe it or not, one of the things that we look at is the shape and location of a house in vastu. And if your door faces south, right, that can be a lot of what you would consider yang energy in Chinese medicine, or a lot of fire. The fire element, right, is in the south. And if your door faces the south, right, and you have mental illness, right, it can exacerbate it. Right? Believe it or not, your door should face to the east if you have mental illness, if possible, right? Because it allows you to integrate with the natural flux of the planet where you ride it out. Whereas the south and north, right, are most people don't know the south is a growth point and the north is a contraction point. So if you're literally facing towards the south, expansion, growth, right, to being things that are too much, like you said, that heart yang excess can literally be the direction of your door, um, where your bedroom is located. These things can impact you. How you sleep, right? Even the colors you sleep in. One of the things that you can do is place water, a bowl of water, a large bowl of water. if you're finding that you're having mental disturbances, especially not able to rest at night, not waking up fully regenerated, and that can create, a daily mental imbalance. You want to make sure that you keep those things. Grounding is another thing. Standing on the earth. One of the things that they've noticed with ADHD, another quote unquote so called mental illness. I don't know how real that is, but ADHD, they say that when you take the children or individuals that have it out into green pastures, into forests, like areas where there's green, they calm down, right? They're able to focus. This was
Right.
a study done in Chicago, about in the 1990s. They did the study, right, and showed that it does. The concrete. I mean, think about it like this: the concrete that we live in, right, that is detaching us from the natural flow of the planet. And these people that are mentally sensitive pick up possibly on these things even more so.
Mm-hmm.
So it just exacerbates the problem. But grounding, standing with your feet on the ground, which is a Chinese Taoist practice, grounding yourself can literally help with mental instability. And there's other things, you have acupuncture where it helps rewire or reroute some of those energetics. Um, Yoga, meditation, all these things can help. And of course, the milder cases are a lot easier to deal with, but those extreme cases, you have to have almost like a full, complete gamut of everything in place from morning, noon, to night. From beginning of the year to the end of the year, you have to have so many things in place to stabilize that individual, to have some sense of normalcy. So those are some of
Right.
the things that we can look at doing to even try to help offset or treat some of these illnesses.
Indeed. 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 Yeah, man. So I mean, we had some couple more, man, but I think the fundamentals is laid out. You know what I'm saying, or whatnot. Um, yeah, because this is. I mean,
It
that's a
is. The groundwork has been laid.
indeed, indeed. So, as always, this episode was brought to you by Push It Forward Media Group, Caliprucia Astrology, and our good people over there on Patreon. And big up to everybody that's out here on the live chat and everything like that, man. Big up to y'all. Great comments. Great input and stuff like that. We definitely appreciate you guys tuning in with us, indeed, or whatnot. Indeed. But we went a little longer today, so I ain't gonna be too long winded at the end. So, Rod, you got anything you want to say before we get out of here, brother?
No, just we'll see you next time, same channel, folks.
Indeed, indeed. So with that being said, you guys take it easy out there. We'll be back next week around the same time, same place. Another great episode. We're out. Peace.